are going to make a special dish today, and we're going to talk a little bit about it after we explain what it is. Goulash. Now, goulash is probably one of the most misunderstood dishes on the planet, and a Hungarian would tell you that whatever we serve as goulash in America is nothing like goulash. But in fact, we're going to do a traditional Hungarian goulash today, but we're going to make it as it was intended to be, and that is, it's in the style of Tokány. And Tokány is one of the four types of stews that you would find in Hungary, and what makes it distinctive is it has meat, vegetables, and we finish it with a little bit of cream, and of course it's got a little paprika in it as well. What the Hungarians think of as goulash, they actually pronounce goulash, and it's a little bit different. It's actually a soup, and it can be thin or thick, but it's nothing like the heavy stews that we have here. What we're going to do today, though, is make a tokány, and it's actually called Csikós tokány, which in Hungarian roughly means cowboy stew, and because its origin is from the Great Hungarian Plain with its own cowboys who were the herders back in the day. And they're the ones that figured out how to make something that we would call a goulash, make it in a big pot over a fire in the middle of the field, and after they were done eating, they would cook down the rest to evaporate all the liquid, and then they'd scrape it up, roll it in animal skins, put it in their saddlebags, and ride off to the next day, where all they needed to do was add water into a pot with the dried food, and voila, they've got an instant meal again. So we're not going to go through all that trouble today, but we are going to show you how to make this beautiful dish. We've got some ingredients to start with. The first is bacon, which of course, don't get excited, Agnes, but this is probably what you start most of these dishes with. Also pork rib. This is boneless pork rib, which is perfect for this because it's got just enough fat to stay moist, but it also cooks quickly enough so you don't have to cook it down for a long time. Of course, onions. We're going to deglaze with a little bit of white wine, which in this case is a Riesling, dry Riesling whenever possible. We'll use some paprika and some chopped tomatoes, and we are going to finish after it's all cooking by adding some sliced green pepper and some sour cream. It takes about 15 or 20 minutes to prep all the ingredients and about 45 minutes to cook, so it's not a complicated or long drawn out dish. It's really, really wonderful. So if you're ready, why don't we start on our prep? Okay, to start with, we've got bacon. Now you can use regular bacon out of a package, or you can step your game a little bit and use slab bacon that you're going to cut into bigger pieces than the usually thinly sliced bacon. This happens to be bacon ends, which means you're going to get thick and thin pieces, irregular cuts, and so on. This is exactly what you want to start this dish with, if you can. We will remove some of this excess fat before it goes in the pot, but this is going to be a wonderful way to add a base of not just flavor, but a cooking medium, which is then going to be used to cook the pork rib. Pork rib, when it's boneless, looks just like this. We're going to cut it into pieces about yay big and then fry it in the pot, and we're going to brown it. And this is a fair bit of meat, so we probably are going to do it in stages, so you don't do the whole thing at once. It's important to note that the meat will actually cook faster and be more properly cooked if you don't crowd the pot. So when we think of cutting this into what will be roughly cubes of this size, and we put them on the bottom of the pot, you almost imagine a checkerboard. You basically want an equal amount of space between each one of the pieces of meat. You don't want to just jam it all in. The onions we're going to use today are yellow onions, and we're going to show you how to slice them in just a minute. Lastly, I mentioned Riesling. Always use dry wine when you need it to deglaze a pan. We're using Riesling in part because Riesling is very common in Hungary and throughout the former Austro-Hungarian Empire, which would include modern-day Austria, of course. This is sweet paprika, and paprika, of course, is a dried, ground pepper that is distinctive in Hungary. Paprikas, though, come basically in two forms. There's sweet and there's hot. And sweet paprika is not actually sweet, it's just not hot, which is hence why it's called sweet. That's what we're going to do our cooking with today. And last but not least, just a word about the tomatoes. We grow beautiful tomatoes out here, but if it's not August, September, or early October, they're not going to be local and they're not going to be fresh. So my suggestion is, when you're cooking, if you don't have perfectly ripe local tomatoes, just buy things that are canned or packaged. It's a much better, much more reliable ingredient to use. Okay, so we now are going to start chopping up the meat. We're going to start with the bacon, and the objective here is to get it into pieces that are appropriate for eating. And as I mentioned earlier, these are bacon ends, so they're going to be irregular shapes and sizes. So the whole point here is to standardize it, get it to basically a mouthful. And we'll just work our way through and also remove any pieces that look as though they're going to be a little bit tough to chew. And as you can see, I'm setting aside some of the pieces of fat so that they can go into the pot but then be taken back out again.
So you need this fat stuff.
Exactly. Well, you need it because you want it to break down, and we're going to use it to brown the other meat too. Next is going to be the pork rib. And as you can see, it's the pieces are going to vary a little bit in length, but they're basically 6 to 8 inches long. And if there were any really big pieces of fat, we'd probably cut them out. We don't have it on this one, so we're just going to cut into cubes like so. So you have goulash in Poland, right?
Yes, we do. We do a little bit different than you do, and excuse me. And we actually use
like organ meats.
Yes, we use the organ meats. It's like hard, and some people use the kidney and liver and pork meat. So we cooked, and for it's like maybe 2 hours, and then we didn't add any tomato sauce. It's just very simple, and we serve with the most we serve with potato.
Yeah.
So, and I want to say, it's pretty good, and the goulash is really, tastes wonderful.
Okay, what we're going to do right now is slice an onion. Voila. Okay. Sliced onions ready for the pot. Okay, so time to cook. We're using a cast iron enamel pot. You can see it's a little seasoned. It's been used for a couple decades. We have it on a medium flame, and we're going to start with some of those bacon trimmings just to start to, thank you, render the fat out of them, and then we're going to have the bacon itself. Probably the longest part of this the most involved part of this whole dish is rendering the bacon fat and frying the sliced pork. Because once that's done, all the other ingredients go in very quickly, and then it just cooks on autopilot for about 45 minutes. So if you can just get yourself through the first few minutes, you're good. The reason I'm keeping the meat separated is this is not going to stay in the pot. I'm just rendering fat out of it. The solids are actually going to be taken out, so I don't want to mix it all together. First, we're going to remove the rendered bacon fat, or the solids, I should say. We're going to finish frying up the bacon meat. We're going to remove that and set aside. Then we're going to start frying the boneless pork rib. I'm sticking a plate under the pot to get as much of the fat to drain away as possible. Alright, so heat back on. Okay, so remember what I said about the meat? You don't want to just dump all of it in?
Yes, because?
Because it won't cook properly. Okay, time for the onions. We still have the bacon fat in here, having just taken the meat out. The onions are going to go in. You can see they are sliced onions. These are not chopped. Sliced is very important. If you want to learn how to slice an onion, you can see that on a separate video. Agnieszka, would you please get some safflower oil?
Yeah.
I want to add just a little bit more. You don't want to burn these onions. Okay, so the heat is on medium-low right now. So time for wine. We will use a dry Riesling that we grew here. It's a wonderful sound, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
So you want to saute the onions until they are translucent, which means the light can pass through them. You can sort of see through them. And we're almost there.
Yes.
So what do you think? We translucent?
Yeah.
Okay, so time to deglaze, and we'll use...
Beautiful.
Now, what I just did is highly controversial. There are Hungarians that will be very upset with me that I'm actually deglazing the pan with white wine.
Why?
They just don't think you do that. But as a cooking technique, it is classical and essential. It is the best way to deglaze a pan. Almost all of the alcohol burns off. There's very little flavor that's actually added. But what it does is it liberates all the flavor that was otherwise stuck on the bottom of the pot. So the bacon's back in. That looks good enough to eat already. Now the pork. Now we throw this dish into high gear. As I mentioned at the beginning of the program, when it comes to tomatoes, if they're not perfectly fresh and local, always instead use something that's packaged. In this case, we're going to use 2 boxes of chopped tomatoes. The volume's about 750 grams, which is about 2 cups of chopped tomatoes. And we're going to use twice the amount because we're doing twice the recipe. One of the signatures of a Tokány is there's just enough liquid in it. In other words, the meat at the top should be resting on the tomatoes. You don't want it all submerged. If you've got it submerged, you've got too much liquid. Okay, next we're going to add some salt. And we need 3 teaspoons of salt for this, and 4 to 5 teaspoons of sweet paprika. So we mix everything together. And again, you can see how you have just enough liquid so the top layer of meat rests comfortably on the surface.
Yes.
We happen to have this on one of the larger burners on our stove. We don't need it to be on the larger one. We actually want it on a smaller one because we want it to just simmer gently. We don't want it to cook too fast. Okay, we need to slice green pepper for this dish. And these thin strips of green pepper are laid on top of the goulash as it's simmering. They will eventually be absorbed into the dish, but you want them to cook on top first. Done. You can see that the Tokány or goulash is just beginning to bubble. Means the simmering is perfect. So you just lay these on top. And it's important to bear in mind The secret to making this dish taste great, and for that matter, most long-cooked meals, is you're building layers of flavor. One layer upon the next layer, upon the next layer, upon the next layer. And we are simply adding the latest layer to this dish. Those peppers don't just add color, but they're actually going to add flavor as well. Importantly, they're also going to add some liquid. So you're going to see as this cooks, the pot is actually going to have more liquid when we take the lid off in a little while. That's okay. We're actually going to let it evaporate off. So we put the lid back on. Yep. Perfect. Okay, so the goulash, or goulias, or tokány to be precise, has been simmering away for about 30 minutes. So let's have a look. Ah, perfect.
Beautiful.
Now, as you can see, I am not stirring everything together because I want the peppers to remain on top for right now. And while we let some of the liquid come off, remember how I said that the peppers were going to release some liquid? Well, there it is. We now want that to evaporate. We're going to give that a couple minutes to run. And when it does, we're going to prepare the sour cream. And as you all may know, if you add hot liquid to cold sour cream, you get curdled sour cream. So there's a technique that we can use to minimize the risk of that, and which we're going to show you in just a few minutes once this thins out a little bit. We now have to prepare the sour cream, and so now that you can see some of the liquid has boiled off the top of the tokány, we're actually now going to give this a stir. First time we've actually stirred the pot since it started simmering with the peppers on top. We did that deliberately. We wanted the peppers to retain some of their structure. Before you can add the sour cream, you actually have to raise its temperature so that it is, so the sour cream is closer in temperature to this. So what are we going to do first? We're going to get a cup of sour cream. Raises the temperature. Okay, so before we add the sour cream to the pot, we do want to just taste for flavors. Make sure that we don't need to add some salt or pepper. Okay, well, time for a prayer. Ready, everybody?
Yeah.
Looks like we made it. No curdles.
That's beautiful.
We're going to let that sit for just a few more minutes and take care of the spatula. Okay, so give it one more stir, gently. So we're going to plate now. We'll start with a little bit of spatula.
That's nice. It looks good.
Seasoned with a little salt and white pepper. So again, solids just to the side of the spatula, and then sauce across the top, and we'll add some cucumber salad over on the serving table. Okay.